Hey, thank you everybody so much for attending this webinar tonight, which is making the most out of our summer. Even though we got a month left before school starts, this is still great evergreen content that you'll get to hear. So not all is lost. You can still apply it to when you do internships in the fall or the winter or even next summer. So my name is Faiza Mokhtar. I am the District Justice for District 30, which covers Southern California, which is Orange County and San Diego counties. Today, I'm going to present our two speakers who will engage in a discussion about the legal market, emerging trends, and so forth. So first, we have our moderator, Nicole Winget. You may know her. She is our International Vice Justice, and she is currently, she's currently the Dean for Adult and Online Education at Campbell University. And then next, our presenter, Jay Brenner, who is a managing director for client development at Major, Lindsey, and Africa, which is one of the biggest legal recruiters in the world. So with that in mind, they will have a discussion. If you have any questions that pop up during this discussion, feel free to pop it in the chat. We will catch it. And if not, there will be some little time at the end, maybe for questions outside of the discussion. And with that in mind, I will hand it over to Nicole and we'll get this discussion rolling.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. I really appreciate it. Good evening, everybody. I'm really excited for this discussion tonight. And I'd like to start with Jay, if you will expand a little bit more. What is legal recruiting? What is it that you do and why are you here to talk to us tonight?
Thanks, Nicole. Thanks to everyone for having me. It's an honor to be here and hopefully you find it useful. Jay Brenner, as was said, I'm a managing director at Major, Lindsey in Africa, and I went to law school 20 years ago and spent most of my career in and around legal recruiting, staffing, legal project management. It's a very unique space, and I've actually really enjoyed and loved my career. So hopefully I can share some useful information for everybody. And I really encourage everyone to please ask questions. I will be most comfortable pivoting to whatever comes up based on what I'm saying. So please ask questions, and I'm happy to go into detail on any answer. Question: what is legal recruiting? It's probably easiest to just describe our company and how we approach legal recruiting at Major Lindsey in Africa. We're an international legal recruiting firm. So we're in the US, Asia, Europe, some presence, I believe, in Latin America, mostly US based. And we divide out our practice into, as you might imagine, right, law firm practice. We recruit at the partner level, so we have one group that focuses exclusively on law firm partners and creating and finding opportunities for law firm partners between firms. We have an associate practice group that works with law firm associates. Same thing, finding opportunities laterally between firms. We have an in-house counsel recruiting group. As you might imagine, they focus on placing GCs, associate GCs, heads of compliance, heads of privacy, etc. I work in our interim legal talent group, and my whole career has been very niche, but it's what I've done my whole career is interim legal talent. So a lot of people don't know what that is, right? Contractors. I've done a number over the years of large document review projects. For a long time, my job was staffing and managing document review projects. Interim legal talent it's been a fun career for me because a lot of folks, for whatever reason, don't embark upon a traditional path in their career as lawyers, found their way at some point or another to an interim job. And as I said, that can be anything from document review and litigation all the way up to interim general counsel. And that's just where I'm from, myself and my career. We also at Major Lindsey in Africa do some consulting work in terms of working with law departments to structure their staff, to train their staff, to select technology, to help with implementation. So we have, again, 5 practice areas: consulting, interim legal talent, in-house, partner level in law firms, and then associate firms. So we recruit. That's what we do. We mostly recruit from a company out standpoint, so we don't have a service where we'll represent folks and help them find jobs. But we network with folks and look for opportunities, and again, help companies find staffing solutions that work for them both on an interim and permanent basis.
First off, thank you for reading my mind and answering the what is a interim legal talent. That you knew that question was coming, so you've already addressed that. You just said something very interesting that I think our attendees would love to hear more about. This concept of being company out and that you network. How does someone who wants to network with you or your organization, what is either a law student or somebody in between fields, how do they start that networking? What do they do to get in contact with you or get seen by you, I should say?
It's a great question. And just backing up a bit, when the topic was first presented for the call, and I apologize for my lighting. When the topic was first presented for the call, how to make use of the summer, how to be productive, the one thing that really did come to mind, Nicole, was networking. I've been doing this for 20 years now, and it's always been a cliche. Work on your network, talk to folks, informational interviews. I've come to a point in my career where I really believe that is crucial, and it's becoming a little bit of a lost art. In terms of our company, first of all, I'm happy to serve as a point of contact for anyone. But I would talk to folks. Obviously, I would recommend being strategic and setting goals and understanding where your path is laid out if you have it. And then networking strategically within that path. In terms of our organization, again, every situation is different. And I'm a little bit curious as to the makeup of the call. So again, please ask questions specific to your situation, and I'd be happy to answer them. But for folks in school, I think the general idea is to have some idea of where you're headed and what your goals are in terms of getting there. And most attorneys I've found will take the time and talk to you. So I would recommend networking within your communities, within the practice groups that you want to target, within the industries that you want to target. And it's worth, in my mind, it's absolutely worth 19 people ignoring you if one person will take your call, will sit down with you, have a cup of coffee. Absolutely worth it. It's what I do in my practice relative to talking to in-house counsel and finding opportunities for our interim talent. I'm willing to reach out to 100 people. If I get 5 folks that want to talk to me and that have a need, it's more than worth it. So it's very much a numbers game. I very much encourage networking. I think I'm about to answer a different question, so I'll stop. But then, just being aggressive and reaching out is my basic advice.
So I don't know how to ask this quite gracefully, but we're a social media obsessed culture. We really are. So when you're talking networking, do you recommend picking up the phone and making a phone call, emailing somebody, doing a little subtle LinkedIn stalking? How do you suggest connecting with people within the practices that you're interested in? And I know there might be a lawyer answer of it depends, but what have you seen successful?
It's a great question. First of all, I'm glad you brought up LinkedIn because that's exactly where I was about to go, and then I stopped because I figured it would be a better answer.
We're reading each other's minds. This is getting a little weird, Jay.
I'll tell you this story. I had coffee with a gentleman who was in-house. I was down in Houston a couple of weeks ago, and he said he was looking for a job. And he was in-house at a good company, in a good position, probably a little underpaid. So he was seeking my advice. And I looked him up on LinkedIn while I was sitting there with him. And my jaw dropped because he did not have a picture. He only had 10 or 15 connections. He had no information filled out other than sort of where he was. And to me, that's a cardinal sin in the current environment. Recruiters use LinkedIn, period, full stop. So LinkedIn is your resume. Absolutely, period, full stop. Have your LinkedIn professionally done in terms of a professional headshot, not only up to date in terms of the roles you've had, but detail under those roles with keywords that you would want recruiters to search for. Your LinkedIn should be completely well done because recruiters use it now. When I started recruiting 15 and 20 years ago, we had to, pick up the phone and call the law schools and call the paralegal schools and network, which is still very important. Networking is still incredibly important, but LinkedIn can be huge.
Excellent.
LinkedIn, you will get recruited off LinkedIn if you don't. If I'm telling you something you already know, I apologize.
No,
But I can't emphasize it enough. In terms of how to reach out, which I think was your other question, Nicole, it's a great question. Again, first of all, I want to remind you, you reach out to 20 different people. You may get ignored 18 times. Don't worry about it. As long as it's a professional reach out, it's not a big deal. They may not even see it. I use LinkedIn Messenger. I use email if I haven't. I don't typically pick up the phone and call somebody out of the blue that I don't already know. Some people will. I don't find that effective. And most people, I think, aren't comfortable with it anymore. But I absolutely use LinkedIn. I absolutely use email. And then once you've made a connection, well, then you can use that person, hopefully, to connect you to other people and ask for what's called a warm introduction as opposed to a cold reach out. So I find that effective as well. And then, everyone's different, but I love sitting across a table and having a cup of coffee with somebody.
We've got a great question based on that cup of coffee, if I may ask you to clarify. And it's from an anonymous attendee. Once you have a coffee date, what should you be talking about? And I think that's a great question. Could you share some advice there?
Sure. I think it's important to have objectives, right? Let's take a few hypotheticals, and please, anonymous contributor, share in the chat what your objective is, but have that in mind, right? When I sit down with I try to meet with GCs and AGCs because I'm looking for opportunities to place interim resources within companies. But I don't go in, and that's obviously not the first question I ask. My first objective is to establish a personal rapport with somebody. Thank them for meeting me. Obviously, I'm incredibly grateful for their time. I try to set all meetings to, if it's a Zoom meeting, it's going to be 30 minutes so that I can be respectful of time, maybe even 20 if I know they're incredibly busy. And then if they're willing to meet me in person for coffee, obviously I try to set that at 45 minutes, something that's not going to be, for me, even after 45 minutes, no matter how interesting, most people have somewhere to go. So the first thing I do is make sure they know I'm incredibly grateful for their time and try to establish a rapport with them. And then again, I want to get to my objective, but I want to do it in a way that is taking interest in them. So I think no matter what, whether I'm selling to them or seeking a job in the future or seeking information, I like asking questions of people. And I love learning about them and their circumstances. Now, if there comes an opportunity for an ask, if, hey, can I have an internship? Or, hey, what about, using us to provide interim resources, whatever your objective is, or, hey, would there be any job opportunities with your company? When it's appropriate and in context, I think is the best time to ask that question. And kind of reading the room is a skill that takes time, but getting there and showing a genuine curiosity about their situation, I think is always well received. And really interesting people will do the same, and they'll take an interest in you, and then a real connection is made. That's always the best.
Excellent. So this is a little bit of an off the wall question, and it just occurred to me, so I'm sorry we didn't talk about this in advance, but I was thinking, I go out to meet with coffee with somebody. I've been having some debates in other organizations whether business cards are what people use anymore. Can you speak to, so I'm the person inviting people out to coffee. Do I leave my resume with them? Do I leave a business card? Do I send a handwritten note after? What's some of the common industry practices as far as that goes?
Most importantly, I think the handwritten note is still very well received. Certainly a thank you is necessary. I have a box of business cards that, quite honestly, I haven't used much. Again, I go back to LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is now, for me, has become the place where I accumulate contacts. I keep a separate list. I would urge that. I would urge keeping a separate, if you will, a mailing list, an email list, so that it's handy, because LinkedIn will not typically provide work email. On LinkedIn, you're mostly going to get their personal email. So I would ask, if you're trying to develop a professional relationship, hey, can I email you at work? Can I email you my resume? I do think paper is probably going to get tossed aside. So I would, if it were me and I were job seeking, I would ask if I could email a resume, or how I should follow up, who I should talk to, and then try to establish that relationship within the company's email system.
Excellent. That plays off a question we just got in the Q&A from Danielle. Should you seek an ongoing relationship or check-in? Is it, when you're reaching out to these people, are you looking to develop a more longer-term relationship? And how do you encourage that relationship as opposed to a one-time meeting and then move on?
Yeah, that's a great question, Danielle. And I think it boils down to what your objective is, and making sure, look, if there's some role that they can play, I don't think it hurts to ask, hey, when can I follow up? How should I follow up? It's a great question because it allows me to tell you this, and I forget to do this a lot, but it's very effective when I do. Schedule the follow-up if there's a real reason to have one before you leave, or make sure you get down the road in terms of having that followed up. You don't want to, if you can help it, say, okay, I'll follow up by email around a next meeting, and then your email gets lost. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. You will get ignored. Don't take it personally. In-house attorneys, law firm attorneys are incredibly busy. Oftentimes, they want to network, they want to help you, they have a need. It's just not a priority. And when they come to think of you, they will email you back. But it may slip for a month. It may slip for 2 months. Follow up again. As long as you're being professional and courteous, it won't be held against you. And if it is, I mean, I honestly don't think it will be. But if it, as long as you're being professional and courteous, you have nothing to lose. But try to schedule a follow-up before you get off the call, because that's the easiest. They're happy to pull out their calendar. Hey, when can I follow up with you? Again, if it calls for a follow-up, right? It may be that the action item is an introduction to someone else. The question is, hey, how should we go about that? Will you introduce me? Should I send an email copying you? Just be very clear on what the follow-ups and the action items are, if any. Again, you should know what your objective is, right? Are you trying to network more within that industry? Are you trying to get a job at that company? And I'm just a big believer in being clear, asking for what you want, listening, understanding. Sometimes it's an open-ended question. Hey, what can I do to advance my career in your industry? What can I do, if anything, to get employed at your company? And then, listening, following through on what they say. Earlier in my career, I spent a lot of time worrying about, again, what somebody thought, what they were thinking, what they might do. I spend less time there now and just more focused on what I can control and following up on my end as much as possible. I'm still human, so it happens, but it's a waste of time, I'll tell you that.
I have a question for Mia, and this is going to shift our focus a little bit. As an older non-traditional graduate, spring of 2026, what is the atmosphere in the hiring realm? Is it friendly to, I love this phrase, Mia, I'm going to steal it, seasoned but new law graduate? Are there different demographics that our members should be aware of? And are there different approaches different age groups need to be taking?
Great question. I believe there is a bias in the market towards competence. I really do believe that. As I work mostly with corporate legal departments. So, and typically corporate legal departments hire experienced attorneys. So I think that I've observed in recent years a real focus on truly who's qualified. And there's been increased, and I actually brought some numbers around DEI and a real effort more in corporate legal departments than law firms to focus on DEI initiatives and making sure that that's a factor, or at least not a blind spot in the hiring process. So I think non-traditional grads, if the question is about, folks coming out of law school a little bit later in life, not only is it not, I don't think, a negative, but may even, again, in the in-house world, potentially be seen as a positive. Now, I can't necessarily speak to law firms. I work a little bit less with law firms. So that's my first gut reaction to that. My personal experience, again, is always positive with folks that have a career before law school. In the world that I came from, which was due diligence, e-discovery, I found better luck with folks that had a successful career before law school of some kind, because there was just that work experience that you could lean in on, that professionalism that was there. There was a reason for going to law school that, frankly, people like me, I didn't have a good reason. Just went for no particular reason. So I'm not sure if that answers it.
Excellent. Thank you. You had mentioned just now and then earlier that you had some statistics and you were curious about some of our members. Did you want to cover that and discuss a little bit about that?
Let's do that. Let's jump into that. So I am curious if everyone can utilize the chat function and we can assess the results. If everyone wants to type in the chat function, what is the most important priority to you in evaluating a potential employer? So that could be law firm, it could be an in-house job, or it could be a non-traditional law job. What would be the most important factor?
So I am just being told that chat is disabled and I don't know how to turn it on. Oh wait, hold on. Aha, I think I figured it out. Will you try again? I think I just turned it on. I apologize.
Good.
There we go. So if you'll put in the chat, wonderful. Thank you. So the question is, what are our attendees? What are you looking for? What's the most important thing you're looking for in an employer or a position? Is that a fair summary, Jay?
Yeah, the most important priority to you in evaluating a potential employer.
Mia states turnover. I love that one. That's a great one. Anybody else want to chime in? What are some of the things you've seen, Jay? I know you have some statistics. What are the trends that you've seen?
I can share, and I think I can. So let me try this.
I think I turned on screen sharing right. I messed up chat, but I think I got screen share it. Culture, we've got culture in the corporation. That's another one. Stable growth and resiliency, both at an individual and firm levels. Wonderful.
Great. Can everyone see, this
Yep.
list of priorities here?
Yep.
So this is from a survey. One of the great things about, and I promise I'm not selling, but one of the things I love about Major Lindsey in Africa, if you follow us on LinkedIn, and please do, we are not a company that likes to get our name out there by putting our name on a bunch of banners at conferences and so forth. We do some of that. But the way that we mostly get our word out about what we do is through a rigorous collection of data. So we do a millennial survey and a Gen Z survey. This is from our millennial survey that I think it tracks fairly well. So we not only gather data, but we do it based on generation and try to find out what's going on in the marketplace. So this was, I thought, a very interesting summary of what people's priorities are as they evaluate employers. Number one should be no real surprise. I think maybe sometimes we have a hard time admitting it, but it's certainly always been mine, which is just, hey, what's the comp? What's the comp package? Right. So that's still kind of tops. Obviously, number two, slightly behind that, is work-life balance, development. Then you get into progressive policies, which has taken front and center in recent years relative to social changes, but so it's high, but it's not at the top. And then employee wellness, different things you can see. I won't read through them all. I will tell you that anecdotally, my experience matches this. Particularly that work-life balance is so high. We have seen coming out of COVID that law firms, it used to be years ago, if you were recruiting for a corporate legal department, an in-house position, law firm attorneys were almost running to get away from the billable hour and to get into a law firm, or excuse me, an in-house environment. That was sort of working in-house was thought to be a destination for attorneys. We're no longer seeing that, just general trend lines, because during COVID and some of the social changes I think that took place around that time, 2020, work-life balance, a greater awareness and appreciation for these things that emerged over a period of time. Really talented, I think, good attorneys and paralegals have found what they're looking for more in law firms and been able to negotiate and get concessions relative to work-life balance and compensation, such that in-house opportunities are no longer seen as necessarily more desirable. So that's a major trend that we've seen over the last couple of years that's noteworthy. I've had in-house legal departments ask us to recruit for roles, and frankly, we can't fill them. And it's because they're just no longer differentiated from law firms. So that's a good sign relative to law firm culture, work-life balance, compensation. We suspect maybe that will begin to reverse a little bit as the market softens, but it really hasn't yet in a significant way. So it's interesting to see. And again, I'm looking through the responses. Yeah, purpose, stable growth, resiliency, these match what we've seen. And again, still compensation is super important. But it's begun to shift a little bit.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that.
Maybe a better way to say is the environment has stabilized out across different opportunities from in-house to law.
Excellent. Thank you. So kind of looping back to where we started, besides networking, what are some other ways that people can make the most out of, we'll say summer, but any pause in law school or career? What are some other things that would help benefit them besides networking?
Well, I think experience can't be beat. So if you're not interning and Nicole, I don't know if you know this, but are the majority of our participants in school still, or are we?
I don't know if you want to put in the chat where you are in your legal career or law adjacent career. Please feel free to share that. I recognize a few names, but don't want to call anybody out without their permission.
Well, so I'll speak to I'll speak to some scenarios. So I think, generally speaking, I'm just a big believer in experience and gaining references and gaining allies in the workplace. So if you're in school, internships and summer programs are obviously important. If you're newer in your career and you're unsure of which direction to take, like I was, I think contract work, I'll always throw a pitch out for contract work. It's an opportunity. Most of the contract positions, interim positions that I've worked on over the last 20 years have been for incredible clients. Corporate clients are the biggest users of what we call ALSPs. I don't know if everyone's familiar with that term, but alternative legal services providers. Yeah. So for anyone in the group that doesn't feel like they have a real path or a real clear direction in where you want to go with your law career, I highly recommend looking into working for an ALSP. Major Lindsey in Africa's interim legal talent division. I'm happy to connect you to a recruiter in your geography, but there's other companies that do it. I'll be democratic about that here. My former company is now called Concilio. Great company. They have opportunities. I also used to work at PwC, and I know the folks that run their managed attorney review program. That's a terrific company to work for because they have that big four brand, and they often place attorneys with corporate projects. So I don't want to go too far down because I may be talking to nobody here, but that's a great opportunity to do things for short or long term. And then certifications. I mean, I'll throw out a pitch for certifications, right? Data privacy has been a hot area for us this year. There are data privacy certifications that you can get easily. It's a challenging test, but there's no major barrier to getting a data privacy certification, which can set you up to work in that area. So there's various certifications that you can get. That's always something to do if you don't know what else to do. And so I recommend that. And then, of course, I always throw a plug in for work-life balance as well. So legal things to step away to make you more well-rounded. That will always show up professionally, and I need to get back out there and jog some more.
So I'm going to ask you to expand on that a little bit, because I'm the queen of trying to promote outside involvement. Are there any, I don't know if volunteerism is the right word, or extracurricular, are there any areas that are more or less attractive in the legal field? And again, that might be it depends on the firm. But are there any particular non-legal areas you think you've seen beneficial experience in?
Well, everybody knows that the practice of law is a high stress. It's a high stress practice. The rates of addiction and substance abuse and depression and any negative health outcome that you can imagine historically been higher amongst lawyers than the general population. Mm-hmm. So I will always throw a plug in for taking care of your mental health, taking care of your physical health. If you're early in your career, being hyper vigilant about that. There are helpful resources available if you've already identified a problem. Again, interim work and contract work has been a real saving grace for folks that are struggling. I mean, if you think about the practice of law historically, folks come out and they work at, typically will either be on the big law path, which can lead to in-house jobs quickly, or they can be on a government path perhaps. And then, obviously, again, matriculate in-house at some point, but there's also a number of people that, well, some people matriculate to what I used to call street law, and my old boss used to call street law, which was, divorce, criminal, those types of practices where you maybe get paid a little bit more in cash, and then have very successful careers in those types of law where you can eventually hang a shingle. And then there's just a number of people that bounce around for whatever reason. So I realize I've gotten a little bit off track here, but it can be stressful early in one's career if you don't necessarily know what path you should be on. But just know you're not alone. There's resources available. Take care of yourself. Hold on to that law degree. There were times in life when I thought of, hang on to that license or the ability to practice. It's not always a linear path. For most people, it isn't, but there's a lot of value in it. So I don't know how I got there with that answer, but take care of yourself. This was the basic message there.
That is great advice. And to speak to your earlier question, you were asking kind of a spread of who's on the call. Of the people that answered, we have a few mid-law career 2Ls. We've got a few undergrads as well. Some people that are undergrad and legal internships. So it sounds like some people are following your advice. If you could go back and give College Jay a piece of advice in preparing for law school, knowing what steps you took next, what advice would you give first our undergrads and then our law students?
And it's a great question. And I think I was a unique case a little bit, but I would really encourage folks to follow their passion, to get experience and follow what you're good at. I think, we talk about passion a lot, but find out where you really excel. Do the self-reflecting now so that you can steer your career in a direction that will be more fruitful early. I learned that for example, as I shared earlier, really like to be around people. There's lawyers that are around people, right? Litigators, client-facing folks that are in court every day, certain in-house lawyers that are really a crucial part of the business. There's ways to do so many different things in law that you probably don't even think of when you're sitting in law school, reading a Civ Pro case or sitting in common law, thinking theoretically about Bush v. Gore or whatever. So there are so many different things, and you don't have to know, but do the self-reflecting to at least begin to think about what you might like to be doing with your time. Because again, I know attorneys that get lost in contracts, that get lost in the day-to-day grind and love it. And I know people that need to be doing something different all the time. And it's never too early to start to think about those things and make sure that you're cultivating the right experiences to keep you happy as you kind of progress.
Thank you for that. And I love hearing people talking about finding their passion and partnering it with what you're good at. Because I'm very passionate about baking, but I'm awful at it. And you got to kind of pick what you're good at and you love to do. Right. You mentioned a little while back when we were talking about LinkedIn, and I circled it and then forgot to ask you this question. You said to use keywords, and I presume this applies to LinkedIn resumes because so much is done by AI. How does someone figure out what the right keywords are to use?
So I think relative to the best way to do it probably is go find the job you want and read the job descriptions of the job that you want and make sure those words are in your description of what you did. If it's honest, right? You don't want to create a fiction. But if you really badly want to be a transactional lawyer in-house and you've had some experience reviewing contracts, go look at some job postings and see I deal with this a lot with folks that underplay their own experience. So if you've had some internships, you've done some things, don't underplay your experience. Now, I think the work experience that you have pre-passage of the bar is not going to get overanalyzed, to be quite honest. So you really want to be, while you're in law school, positioning yourself for whatever firm or role you want after law school, networking and trying to intern at those places and building those relationships and trust there is most important. So being at the right kind of firm while you're in law school is important. But I would say read job descriptions of jobs you want. Early in my career, I made the mistake of thinking that job descriptions were ideal, that companies, well, if I sort of hit some of these, I'll be okay. That's really not true. When companies list job descriptions, that's really what they want, and they'll go find it, particularly the higher you get up the value chain in these organizations. We recruit general counsel for Fortune 100 companies, and they send the job descriptions out through our internal network. And I have the opportunity to recommend my GC clients and associate GC clients for these positions. And I promise you, if they don't hit every single bullet on these job descriptions, they're not going to be considered, because our recruiters can go find via LinkedIn and their own network exactly what they're looking for. So as you build your experience profile, you'll know what is important in those particular areas and make sure that it's announced on your resume. If it's doing data privacy impact assessments for a company, that's a specific term. If it's negotiating technology agreements for an in-house client, that's a specific term. If it's arguing motions in criminal matters, probation hearings, whatever the specific thing is that you do, put it out there. Be very detailed in what you've done. Obviously, you want to be very careful not to name clients or breach confidentiality of any kind. But beyond that, be as specific as you can about the things that you've done, because for relevant jobs, they'll want to know it, and recruiters will search. And LinkedIn Recruiter is a highly powerful search engine.
So I'd like to encourage all the attendees. We have about 10 minutes left. So if you have any questions, now is the time to ask them. Please feel free to put them in the Q&A or in the chat. I want to make sure I leave enough time for any questions you all have. Jay, what have we not talked about that you wanted to talk about? What questions haven't I asked that you wanted me to ask?
You've covered a lot. I was going to get into some other survey results, but I think we mostly covered them relative to diversity and so forth. I am curious in the chat, tell me what types of law, what types of practice you are trying to matriculate to. So what types of lawyers do we, because it looks like we've got several 2Ls and some undergrads, which I love. So I love hearing that. I'd love to hear just a few folks share what types of law they want to go to, and I think that'll maybe stimulate. So international law, in-house or common law, business, patent, etc., IP. Excellent. Animal.
Oh,
Excellent.
that's interesting.
Litigation.
In my previous life, I was a criminal defense attorney, and I've never heard that referred to as street law, but I am going to claim that, by the way. I was a street lawyer, and I'm going to credit you, Jay.
Yeah. So I got out of law school in Memphis, and my early legal career resembled something out of a John Grisham movie, because I worked for a criminal defense attorney in downtown Memphis. So if anyone's seen The Firm or The Rainmaker, it really did look like that. We were in the same general vicinity. So it looks like a good mix. So I just want to, again, encourage folks to network with people in those areas. So if I see a couple of aspiring patent lawyers, reach out to 20 patent lawyers in your current geography. And don't be afraid to be ignored. And get one of them that'll go to coffee with you. And go to coffee and ask them, tell me about your job. What do you like? What don't you like? And there's YouTube. YouTube is your friend as well, by the way. So if you want to know how to approach a networking meeting, don't listen to me. Go type that question into YouTube and you'll find 5 influencers that have a much better approach to a networking meeting than I have. So the internet is really undefeated in terms of that. But again, don't be afraid to be ignored. Find that one person that will meet with you, that will help you and get you started. And really, the reality is the person that will meet with you, this is circular logic, but those are the best people to meet with anyway, right? Because they're going to be connected, they're going to be kind. Occasionally maybe you'll miss, but I doubt it. You'll learn something. You'll learn something. So, be curious, be fearless, have goals, and I think you'll all do incredibly well. I mean, again, to even show up to an organization like this and take the time to listen to me, that's humbling. But I think that makes it a good sign for it. What is the K. Brubaker? What is the PAO? Loving my work at the PAO. What does that stand for?
That means public affair officer in my world. I don't know if it means the same thing in this acronym. Prosecuting attorneys. Why did that not even occur to me?
Yeah. And those are great, great training grounds to be litigators in prosecutors' offices, criminal. My career goal is to retire to hang a shingle and do criminal law when I don't have to worry about money.
Danielle asked if you could clarify what PwC is.
Yeah, so PwC is PricewaterhouseCoopers. It is one of the big 4 accounting firms. And like other big 4 accounting firms, there used to be big 6 back when I was younger. Some of you may remember those days. These are companies that do a lot of audits of public companies, but they also have really vast consulting practices. So they're these mammoth consulting companies and audit companies. PwC, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, and there's one other that's slipping my mind, but you could look it up, the big 4. Many of them hire attorneys on a contract basis to help with investigations, to help with due diligence. And it's great experience to get, again, early in your career if you're sort of looking around. Again, there's other companies that do that at scale. Concilio comes to mind, Epic comes to mind as big providers of technology along with review attorneys. So look at those companies and understand that there's this whole emerging space of alternative legal services providers. They're not law firms, but they provide legal services at scale. And it's a whole other area. And there's actual careers. It's not just a way to kill time in between careers. And that's where my career got started, is managing projects, having a legal mind, being able to understand what the lawyer's objectives were in a large document review or large due diligence related to a merger or a divestiture, or, as I said, investigation or litigation, but also being somewhat more technical and being able to work with folks that were managing data at scale. So it's a little bit of a niche practice, but it's growing, and it's a career that's available. You I don't think law schools have really caught up. Some law schools incorporate e-discovery and legal technology into their curriculum, but some don't. And so I'm actually glad you asked that question, because that's something I could spend a few minutes talking about, which is technology. I do believe, and you've probably heard it before, that technology it's probably maybe a little overstated the degree to which AI will have an impact, but maybe not, in that there are areas of law which have been historically highly impacted by technology, again, relative to deals and investigations which deal with high volumes of data. Technology has already impacted those over the years, and I think it will continue to impact those. So lawyers that can have a real grasp on various legal technologies, contracts, document review, et cetera, will have a leg up versus those that don't.
Again, reading my mind, I don't know if everybody can see it. You probably can't. I wrote down AI and circled it because that was going to be my next question. How do you see the technology being impacted? So well done once again, reading my mind. Wonderful.
Yeah, so when I got out of law school in 2003, it was what I call the prehistoric days of electronic discovery. If you think about the history, and some of you, you're digital natives or internet natives, but I'm old enough to remember a time period before the internet. It's not useful to the discussion other than to think about the levels of disruption that can be caused. The volume of electronic mail in the early 2000s was explosive, and it was all discoverable in litigation. And so law firm attorneys became way too expensive to look through these volumes of data, and that's where contract attorneys became mainlined. And so a whole new industry sort of popped up over the years, and technology has eaten away at that industry as it's become really more automated. So again, the attorneys and the practices that understand that technology have a leg up with clients that need a blend of not just legal skill, but a legal technologist of sorts. And so if you're at all technologically inclined, again, I'm curious if your law schools have any programs around that, but nothing will be real world experience around that. So I think the next wave of disruption will be around automating contract systems. It's already happened. It's far along, but contract system due diligence, deals, negotiating contracts, much of that will become automated. Not fully. I don't know if you saw the case around AI where there was an attorney that relied upon AI for his research and got sanctioned because it was all wrong. The cases were made up. So thankfully, we're things of that nature. But real tip for staying abreast of the latest technologies.
Excellent. Well, before I turn it over to Faiza to close us out, first off, thank you so much to you, Jay, and to all our attendees. This was incredibly interesting and informative. Do you have any final words for the group, Jay?
I'm going to put my email in the chat. If I can do anything for you, make introductions, etc., please don't hesitate to reach out. I appreciate the opportunity to come talk to you, tell you about our firm. So, I just appreciate being here.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jay. And with that, Faiza, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Nicole and Jay, for great discussion, great questions across the board. I'm sure everybody found it valuable. I certainly found it valuable just watching from behind the scenes. With that, with the legal market, between the three of us, feel free to ask us, reach out to us and ask any questions. Please don't hesitate to do so. We're here to help. If you want the help, you're more than welcome to reach out. And I did forget to mention what I do for a living. I work in-house at Tennis Channel. So I'm in the legal department and I'm an associate director. So I handle copyright licensing for our entire network. So if you're ever interested in that, you're more than welcome to reach out to me as well. Just type my name in LinkedIn. You'll find me. So, and with that in mind, this presentation will be posted on our YouTube page, which is if you go on youtube.com/PhiAlphaDeltaHQ, all one word, it'll come up in the coming weeks. So if there's something you found interesting and you maybe forgot it after this, but want to go back to it, you'll always have a reference for it on our YouTube channel. And we will have another webinar series, different topic, that's TBD, but it will be coming sometime out in September. Look for emails and social media promotion in August. Thank you again, everybody, for attending. Thank you once again, Jay and Nicole, for the great discussion. And I will give you back the rest of your evening. Have a wonderful night and enjoy the rest of your summer. Thank you very much.
Thanks all. Have a great night. Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Faiza.
Thanks, Nicole. Thanks, Faiza. Thanks, everybody.